Welcome to the new economics of branded content. We have a great panel with Edgar Hernandez, Chief Revenue Officer of Complex Networks, Scott Messer, Senior Vice President of Media at Leaf Group, and Jesse Shaw, Director of Sales for Bleacher Report. So please welcome our panelists. So I was wondering if first you could just tell us a little bit about you and what your main focus is.
Good morning, Edgar Hernandez. I've been at Complex Networks for 10 years now. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with Complex Networks, but started in 2002. It's a brand creating experiences for millennials and Gen Z, primarily in content, commerce, and events. Some of the things that we're thinking about right now when it comes to the branded content space is number one, distribution. Looking outside of some traditional partners that we've been working with into new formats and outlets, podcasts, and cinema, film. Additionally, we're looking at trying to change up transactional branded content to longer form IP that can then be monetized in different ways long term. And then also leveraging our current IP, shows like Hot Ones, which has massive built-in audience for building branded content experiences around that.
Hi, I'm Scott Messer with Leaf Group. We're a publicly traded holding company that operates two divisions of our company. One is marketplaces with brands like Saatchi Art, Society 6, and the other Art Fair. And then there's the media side of the business, which I'm on, which houses about 62 different website brands. The largest of them being premium ones like Hunker, Well and Good, Livestrong, eHow, some of your old internet favorites, and then some longer tails ones like Gone Outdoors and How to Adult and Sciencing.com. And we operate in a fully programmatic space, a direct branded space, sponsored content. We're into events through Well and Good. Livestrong has a few. Hunker is the leading home and design site on the internet, and we have actually the Hunker House, which is in Venice, California. We have it for the entire year, and we're doing brand activations and meetings, and influencers can actually stay there for the night inside the house, which is a pretty unique experience. Legal is the largest challenge with that. And so we're activating in all different ways, and we're really looking to do similar things, grow our IP, understand how to activate better for brands in a longer term and more economical fashion, I think, where you can start to own the IP and build on top of that. Something I want to hear more from you about. And then more page views and more eyeballs. And if you want to talk SEO, we can do that on a different panel.
I'm Jesse Shaw. I'm a commercial director at Bleacher Report, specifically BR football. And when I say football, I mean soccer. So Bleacher Report, sports platform for next generation sports fans, Gen Z, millennials. The brands in our portfolio, House of Highlights, a Gen Z kind of Instagram account, Bleacher Report football, and then also BR Kicks. So our goal is to kind of look at sports through the lens of the players and the personalities. And along that way, we're bringing brands into the fold in new and unique ways, which we'll get into in a bit. My background, I've been on the broadcast and social side at Turner Sports for the last 15 years. When we acquired Bleacher Report in 2012, I took a more kind of active role in that business. And then 2015, I moved overseas to open up the Bleacher Report international office and basically grow our footprint globally through the lens of soccer. And recently came back to the U.S. and my remit now is across both businesses, Warner Media and Bleacher Report, to help grow the sport of soccer through new and interesting ways here in the U.S.
Great. What does the branded content model look like at your company right now, and how do you incorporate that into the editorial strategy?
So we look at branded content a number of different ways. Right now, it's primarily video branded content that we're doing on behalf of brands. Obviously, that's very high production, heavy lift work that becomes very challenging to scale. But that has been primarily for the last 3 years, a lot of ways that we're working on behalf of brands. A new model that we've introduced recently is building branded content off of our IP. Since you have to buy audience across Facebook and YouTube, One way we've looked at it is if we have an audience already built into IP, how do we build shoulder social content to drive viewership and engagement? We also work with influencers. We have a white label business as well. So those are kind of the different ways that we monetize branded content. Currently looking at new models where we're looking more at joint IP. So in the race of developing library content that then could be monetized different ways, looking to build that up. So we have a show called Hot Ones that I referenced before. There's 9 different revenue line items against that show. And so if we can work on behalf of brands to go ahead and fund more of that content, then there will be a long tail opportunity there with these brands.
I'd say for us, our branded content is really in the written space. It's either in the written space for brands like Hunker and Well and Good and Livestrong, and then some of it's in the event space as well, where we're taking them into activations. So one of our large activations this year was with Athleta, and I think we have it's 40 activation points that are not digital. And we're in their stores, we're doing pop-ups, we're taking them out, we're doing speaker series that are a normal part of our programming, and then they get one of their people on the panels, and they're sort of the sponsors of them. So that's a high-level integration, but then we still have some very much workhorse content that is sponsored content in the home pages, or if you're on some of our search-based properties, we're inserting sort of sponsored content that's relevant to the topic that you're searching for into what you're reading when you're doing it in that moment of intent. And we see really high engagement and driving sort of KPI for advertisers through that sort of content.
I think, so for Bleacher Report, branded content for us just has to be just good content, full stop. I think we have to engage with our fans in the way that they talk and connect with their peers. So I think that kind of one-to-one dialogue is so important, because we need to be genuine. And the second that one of our fans, whether they're 13 to 17-year-olds or 18 to 34-year-olds, if they feel like they're being marketed to by a brand, they're going to scroll past it. They're not going to stop. They're not going to engage. So that one-to-one dialogue as being a peer to them, a friend, and speaking to them in that way and bringing brands along in that kind of conversation is super important to us. Kids these days, or sports fans in general, have so many options, entertainment options at their fingertips. So it's vitally important that what we're doing is cutting through, and how we bring brands in an organic way to life is super important. Otherwise, they're just going to turn off. It's not nothing to say that 19 of the top 20 branded posts on Instagram are from Bleacher Report, and we've done that in a way that keeps our fans engaged. And I think we'll talk about that in a bit, but engagement is this kind of currency that we're going to need to be transacting on. Anyone can just buy views, but it's more how do we talk to the fans in an authentic way and really drive home engagement.
Yeah, I was actually wondering, from all of you, what does success look like? Do you have an example of a particular project or campaign that worked very well, and can you give some specifics about how it was formulated, how you targeted it to your audience?
Yeah, we have a recent example with Simple Mobile. They came to us looking for a year-long branded content campaign. And so the idea was that they wanted to build engagement with an audience long-term, and what we saw was that there was an opportunity to actually align them with one of our new shows called The Burger Show, which previously we had a full season of and had performed exceptionally well, delivering 1 million organic video views per episode. And so we built out a strategy where they would own 3 seasons of that show over the course of the year. And what we would do was leverage the talent from that show to create custom pre-roll that would run before the show. And then we would create social branded content that would complement the show's theme. In addition, what they did was create an out-of-home campaign that promoted the show nationwide on billboards in top cities, as well as do events across different markets. And so when we can take a brand and change their line of thinking a little bit about creating branded content experiences, around IP that naturally has built-in audience, and we believe that's a much more effective long-term relationship. Also for us, what we can do is now build a library of content that we can go and distribute on OTT platforms. We could potentially get that content licensed by other streaming platforms, and then it creates opportunities from an international perspective.
One that we had recently was for a floor cleaning solutions company. Like they make a product that you clean your floors with. And we had some branded video content for them. We had some custom content just specifically about cleaning floors and things to do. And so one of the ways that we activated against was using our known search audiences, people who are looking for these things, and then activating them on Facebook and targeting them specifically. It's like people predisposed to cleaning their floors. Yes, there are them. And we're able to drive in extra audiences to that special content we created for them. Then obviously the media component's very straightforward. It's like if you're in that floor cleaning space of our content, they own all of that. And then we drove some really interesting audience insights for them of who is engaging with the content. We can look at who's exposed to our content and who read to the end of it as they just didn't show up, but they actually engaged. And we delivered some really cool insights. And one of those insights, and this is why it's a success, is because they were happy. I think that's if the check clears, that's a success. The halfway?
Yeah. Prepay.
Yeah, there are a lot of prepays. So one of the insights that we drove from them was that the audience that was engaging with their content the most, that really surprised us, was a segment that we have identified called pre-movers, or people who are moving. Because what's the last thing you do before you move out of a house? It's clean the floors. What's the first thing you do before you move into a house? So you clean the floors. So this segment of the audience, and we went back to them with these insights and said, next time we go, we're going to make content specifically for them. No more general floor cleaning. We're going to target our movers population, and that gives us a whole different section of our content and websites that we can utilize for them and different ideas inside the content. And so they're coming back for another round of branded content with us, and I guess that's the second half, is they pay you and then they come back to pay you again. Okay. That's a big success for us. So that's sort of a 360 way for us.
For us, I think success would be defined by how we service fans. And we think that if we put the fans first across any of our platforms,
yes,
or any
them
of our
too.
Yeah, across any of our businesses, the audience falls into line, the brands then kind of line up, and then the revenue comes off the back of that. I think that's kind of we know that if we service them first, we're going to win. A recent campaign we did with Under Armour. So I mentioned our House of Highlights brand earlier. It's, again, on Instagram. It's a Gen Z kind of UGC platform on IG, 13 million followers. It's kind of this kind of rocket ship that we have within our portfolio. So Under Armour came to us and wanted to engage with these 13 to 17-year-old kind of grassroots sports fans and players and athletes. So we took over the name of House of Highlights and called it House of Under Armour. And what we did was they wanted to utilize their athletes, which they have The Rock and Steph Curry and Bryce Harper and all these major athletes out there. We got time with them to post organic UGC content on House of Highlights. And then we put a challenge. We issued a challenge out to our fans to do, what's their hype tape for, their football team in the locker room or, on the basketball court. How do we rally and put challenges out to the community of 13 million? And what we saw was we featured their talents videos on our platform, and then we also, the payoff wasn't necessarily that the guys were in the videos were wearing Under Armour gear. It was the fact that the kids that were submitting these videos got to be featured on House of Highlights. That was the crown jewel. And that was the moment where the brand really felt okay, we have something here. It's not, the payoff is not necessarily a huge spike in sales. Yes, that will come, but it's providing an opportunity for these kids to get really hyped up, as they're in the weight room, training for, the next week's game, to get featured on House of Highlights. And for us, if we see branded content that produces engagement at a multiplier of what we're seeing as our just standard premium content, like 2 or 3x in terms of engagement or views, that's a win for us. So that was a recent example for us, and they were super happy. So getting them to come back would be nice too.
What KPIs were these brands bringing in each of these cases? Since you've got these examples, these great examples there, while you have them in mind, what KPIs were the brands bringing to you at the outset, and what success metrics were you reporting back to them on each of these?
I can go first, just because I just went. So for Under Armour, it was having the new Steph Curry shoes displayed in his piece of content that's featured on House of Highlights that was dropping in the next couple weeks. But it's not a specific call out to his shoe. It's more just like a subtle placement of that in the content. And by engaging the community, that it will come to life that's the next thing for the brand. And so it wasn't necessarily about driving a specific number of guaranteed views. It was like, let's tap into this community, 13 million strong, in a completely organic way, and have those guys featured on the platform. So it wasn't necessarily a straight like sales metric that we were staffed with, but we were able to kind of bring everything together in like a UGC organic way.
I wish our KPI was like that eloquent, but it wasn't.
This is just one example. There's many that are completely written.
Ours was a little more straightforward of like on demo reach, which like they didn't even know their demo. They're just like people who are interested in cleaning floors. It is what it is. And then a little bit of like click through and getting to their site and exposing them to their brand and just putting their brand top of mind at the time when people are thinking about cleaning floors, where we have some utility play at times.
Yeah, for us, the benefit of doing a year-long partnership is I think you could have multiple KPIs. And first was awareness, consideration, and then purchase intent. So working with a third party, we can go ahead and prove out investing in content experiences like this will actually move the needle across the brand throughout the entire year, which then increases the chances of renewal or larger scale partnerships.
So were you doing post-campaign brand studies?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, one of the models that we're trying to figure out right now that we're working on is the power of these sponsorships being equal or greater to television. And so if we can prove that out, then there's an opportunity for us to finally try to tap into those television dollars and move them over to our video programming.
How much brand lift studies are you applying, and is it on every campaign, or is it just on like the big ones, and how do you decide who gets one, when, and how much?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're constantly moving the minimums up to do branded content with us. You know, there's so much transactional branded content out there in the marketplace. It becomes very challenging because all of us and hundreds more out there talking about branded content. So we have a minimum threshold of investment on branded content in order to get a third-party study.
Same for us.
Good. And then what, do you have like a target percentage of how much you want to study? Or is it just like we have to do this because we need to give it back to them? Are you using it for like your internal stuff? Like if you move it up far enough, you're not studying enough to have like a really good baseline for everything. I'm not accusing, I'm just asking questions.
Yeah. So we're being proactive about who we're including that study with as a way of differentiating the investment versus other partners.
Sure. Do you have different levels of studies that you can give people?
Yep, there's definitely internal studies that are cost effective.
Good word.
And then there's third-party studies that can get quite costly. And depending on how deep you want to go with a study, there's multiple studies that you can layer on, and depending what you're trying to prove out, especially.
I was going to say for us too, there's some things initiatives that we're launching basically on a quarterly basis. They're called heartbeats for Bleacher Report. So we'll initiate a first-party panel study each quarter specifically to a category that we're looking to lean in on. The first was in fourth quarter 2018 was sneaker culture, and then first quarter 19 was sports betting, obviously being top of mind. And then now the most recent one, which is debuting actually this week, we're like kind of rolling it out, is around world football and soccer. So what we'll do is we'll do these larger kind of 2,000-3,000 person panel-based studies, but we'll include kind of like our official marketing partners that we work with for the NBA or through UEFA or the NCAA, and we'll include them in these studies about campaigns that they've run with us or just them in general. So we'll have this, it's kind of like part of a larger initiative, but we'll be able to kind of like pick and choose where we bring this to certain brands in like a proactive way. Because obviously the goal is to then, lean into that and show them more as they come on board or re-up or anything. But I think we're kind of taking a proactive approach to that.
So then in that study, it's like you're looking into sneaker culture. So you're asking your audience about sneakers, but how is the brand coming into that?
So I mean, the brand would be more so like on our BR Kicks Instagram account. We're experimenting with how to get brands in the right way there because we cover the entire industry. We cover every single brand, and we're not agnostic there. So I guess it goes back to figuring out how we can work with those brands in the right ways to be proactive on the study side or get them some research that is actually tangible for them. But yeah, we're continuing to evolve, I think, in the sneaker culture space.
Edgar, you guys doing proactive research?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the difference in the marketplace is knowing your audience to a depth and degree that is going to develop long-term partnerships. So a lot of the research that we're doing is understanding the pillars that we play in. So food, music, sneakers, art, entertainment, and gaming. And I think the brands that know their audience best are able to put forth the best strategy, which then, in the world that we're starting to live in that looks at our brands versus agencies, it starts to get into a really interesting place and where we start acting as an agency on behalf of brands based on the level of data and insights that we have on the audience. And so thought leadership comes from developing these types of reports and studies that brands are now wanting to see on the regular, but not willing to pay for them.
And so you're doing that outside of like these branded studies that we talked about previously.
Yeah, correct. This is just us understanding the audience and then being able to contextualize that for the brands in a way that would then allow them to understand how they can play in that space. Everyone's trying to reach millennials and Gen Z, but they don't understand it. So
That's deep.
That's true.
So it's, I guess, in all of our best interest to be out there educating them.
That's also interesting because that comes with like the culture of like our work and our workplace and the environment too. Like if you walk around Bleacher Report, it's everyone there, or these younger folks that are working with us have the style, and they're wearing the off-whites and they're wearing the hoodies, and they live and breathe sport culture. And like they're the ones that are creating the content because they know like what resonates with their peer group, right? So I think that's really important. Is like when a brand or partner of ours comes into our office, and I'm sure with you guys too, like they feel it immediately. Like they see this massive mural of Michael Jordan. There's a basketball court. It's like everything is open. It's just like we kind of live and breathe the sports culture side for our business, and I think like that's the authenticity is kind of played out. It's like that's what makes it kind of more genuine for us.
It's almost replaced, that information has replaced a traditional sales deck.
Totally.
And that's what we're out in the marketplace really leading with versus stats about the size of our scale, because Facebook or
huge,
YouTube
bro.
can come in right afterwards, and it's
Scale means nothing today.
Yeah.
I think all of our decks now, like, scale is out. The big like 16 billion, like that number that opens, like those are out of all of our decks.
Yeah.
Because there is bigger scale everywhere, and there's deeper reach, but reach and depth, that is impossible.
But you can buy it too, right? So if I think for us, we're starting to see gone are the days of just throwing a guarantee view number on a branded content proposal. Like anyone can just go out and do that and buy views. It's that next level of engagement. O&O specifically, guaranteeing that view number without having to put paid behind it. Like and I'm sure you guys do this too. Mm-hmm. Like that's huge for us, being able to confidently say, we'll deliver this campaign of 2 million views, O&O specific, like straight on our O&O, whether that's social or desktop or mobile, without having any paid behind it.
And then social, your O&O?
Actually, yeah.
Okay. I like it.
So our brand, I mean, our brands on social, like we
borrowed and operated.
Correct. We're frenemies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would, to be honest with you. But, yeah.
Can I switch gears for a second? Okay, we're still going to talk about branded content. A really interesting thing, I think, with Complex, and this is about the economics of branded content and cost, like rising costs. You guys comp sellers on net, and they have net goals. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Let me back up for a second.
Yeah, sure.
Everybody here, like traditional sales models, you are comping your direct sellers on the gross revenue. So their target is like 2 million. 2 million comes in the door. You spend a bunch of money. They still get comped on the 2 million. Is that correct? Is everyone in that model? Is anyone not on that model? Raise your hand, Edgar.
Well, yes.
Okay, now let's begin.
Yeah, so at the end of last year, we started playing around with changing from a top-line comp package to a margin-based comp package. And if you look at the way our business is lined up, we have individual sellers who are selling programmatic, transactional events, branded content, at larger agency-style relationships. So there's multiple different line items that they're having to sell against. And a top-line model doesn't really have them be operators of the business and truly understand the business mix and where the revenue's coming in from. So in order to make us more efficient and more profitable, the idea was to go to a margin-based comp package. And so we've started to hear that in the industry over the past 24 months, and that's where we started to explore it and introduced it at the top of this year. And I could say that already for this year, especially in this marketplace, it was the right time for us to go in that direction, but has increased profitability for the company tremendously. Because now you have 25 salespeople out there who are developing plans, not only obviously to service the brands that they're working with, but also to service the business versus pushing any deal forward, not really understanding the economics of the deal.
I think for
a lot of learnings. Yeah, it was, and mistakes were made for sure. First time that I had in my career introduced that. But it takes a lot of education and a lot of upfront communication. So probably about 5 months in advance, I started seeding it out there strategically to the sales team that we were starting to head in that direction. But it took about 3 months of education and having a fully built out deck, having them understand why. And the comp packages were very complicated, more so where I had to build formulas for every model so that they could see what the translation of top line to margin was, so that top line still played a part as a Trojan horse so that they didn't get totally freaked out. And so that they can go ahead and build their own formulas. So they're tracking in a table every single day how they're getting to goal.
Were the compositions of the deals changing or simply the price structure?
Compositions of the deals were changing. And we've moved to a video first product over the past couple years. So we have a video slate of 20 plus shows that we're producing. Those are deficit funded. We want to get those shows sponsored. Obviously it benefits the company. Then we'll go try to monetize that content in a second window. So we have about 16 shows on Netflix and Hulu right now. We have international licensing deals around that content. So we want to incentivize the seller, so that's a highest margin product. So they are now pushing because they're incentivized to sell that product more so than some other products that are lower margin.
I'd say for us, I mean, we are like most of you guys. I mean, I think we operate on the gross number and we comp our sellers that way. We feel that does, when you have programming and our social team and our content creation team and production and sales working in unison together for idea generation on the front end, we feel like the best ideas are developed in that way, and our sellers are comped that way as well. Differing models. I think it's really interesting what you guys are doing. I can see it from my side. Our sellers, that education would need to be exactly the same. Like there would be mistakes made along the way getting younger salespeople to understand the optics of the business is really important and valuable. So that's interesting that you guys do that.
Yeah, we anticipated a 15% turnover rate because of this new model. We didn't lose a single salesperson due to this new comp plan this year.
Did you, to offset for the lower net number, did you increase like the percentage points that they take home? So, because I mean, you have to keep their take home the same, right? That's the fixed number.
Yeah, so we were able, obviously we wanted to incentivize them, show them the benefits of this plan, so there was the opportunity to earn more money, and there was additional kickers specifically on the products that we wanted them to sell the most.
Same applies for us. Like, so with Warner Media, like our parent company, the incentives come into like when we're building cross-platform like opportunities, right? So if something that gets built on Bleacher Report then makes it through to the NBA on TNT and inside the NBA, there's incentive there for our guys on both sides to like make something bigger, make something more robust, and then for an overarching partner like a Pepsi for us that's playing in a number of different verticals, like having the through line and getting them to come across or build a program that lives on multiple platforms is huge, and it's good for us as a business, it's good for them as a brand, and we want to make the sellers compensated in that way too.
I'm wondering, as you've been developing these new strategies, what are some of the things that you found that were extra challenging or just flat out didn't work?
I mean, white label branded content is a very challenging business, and it's evolved over the years. We loved that model at first in creating year-long partnerships with brands where we were creating all the content for their YouTube channel or their Instagram account. It's massively labor intensive. It's, even though that you have all the understanding of how to build platform and audience, that kind of gets thrown out the window and the brand still thinks they know better. And then it's a very fleeting relationship. You can't get, in our experience, you can't get more than 2 years locked in. So you're building something, an infrastructure and a team and audience for a brand. But that business typically, in our experience, lasts a few years. We've yet to see one that extends beyond 5 years. So I would say that's a really challenging business opportunity, but one that still exists. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity around white label content. And so we're still trying to think through what is the best way of doing that. Is that even a business that we want to be in?
Yeah, so we went down that same like white label content. We set up a whole studio. It had its own division and all these things. The real challenge there is that the people who are doing that are agencies or people that have agency models, which are like scale up and scale down very quickly based on advertiser demand and how much is coming in through the door. But when you're a publisher or you're sort of more traditional and you're like, we're going to build a team, we're going to be good at it, and this team's going to be on staff all the time, and then like some money starts drying up, then you're like, well, if we're going to fire all of them, half of them, we might as well shut the whole thing down, right? And then that becomes like that ability to scale up and scale down is very hard when you're in a business that doesn't scale up and down repeatedly like the temperature. And then I'd say one of our big challenges is really understanding cost. Over delivery is actually becoming like a very big concern for us right now. Like, what is the cost of over delivery to ensure that you're hitting a campaign goal? Whether that's working on viewability or page views or something like that. That hasn't been in our cost calculators before, but now it's starting to come in because as we're selling more campaigns and we're doing better on them and we're overperforming on them, that means that you're eating into something else. And what's the cost of that?
I think one of the challenges for us is the fact that video continues to be like the crown jewel and is so hot right now. And if you have infinite amounts of video, like you're winning in terms of just revenue you're able to extract off that. For us, like we produce a fairly limited amount of actual video content that sits on O&O. We do a ton in social, but I think that for us, if we were able to open the floodgates there and kind of think about the business differently and how we do that in the right ways of producing, like we're not going to sit down and just produce straight shows just to get video content. It has to be done the right way. So that's been a challenge for us. I think also creating an in-house agency to actually accomplish what you guys are talking about. Like it's interesting. We've done that. We've rolled that out. It's called Playmaker. It sits within Bleacher Report, and it's basically a full serve kind of like production house where we have folks on staff kind of embedded in brand X, like at their headquarters, to help them with social, help them with content. And we're experimenting there because, you know, we need to operate on margins. We need to figure out like what makes sense, like, and we don't want to step on the agency's toes, right? Like that's a big thing for us. Like everyone talks about needing to go client direct, which is super important, but like we still need to service that really important agency relationship. So figuring all that out in kind of a balance, I think is a challenge for us, but yeah, we're getting there for sure.
I guess just one final question. Where do you see things going? Like, what are you excited about that you can kind of see developing or brewing?
One of the things that we're seeing right now is brands willing to co-fund, co-develop long-form premium content in a way that we haven't seen before. Is less transactional and less campaign-driven, and looking at platforms differently than just O&O, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and so on, but more new platforms. So, you know, like a Uncle Drew example of what Pepsi did, I think we're entering an era that brands that have strong voices and strong audiences, brands are willing to take a shot, especially if they're proven in the branded content space, to build that type of franchise. And so what we're seeing is people investing in full seasons of our shows with branded content as iteration, or co-developing large-scale new series with the opportunity to potentially monetize that content together down the road. And so I think that's a really interesting opportunity of joint IP. Where, you know, maybe a brand doesn't have the funds to go ahead and create something, a brand meaning like Complex, but another brand can, and then there's a way of taking that much further than our own distribution platform.
I'd say two things that I'm excited for would be, because I have two. One is brands are starting to differentiate now between like scale and impact, and that if you can make an impact, and the second part is voice and getting behind brands that have voice and authority that people listen to, which is for all the people that are doing an okay job but don't develop the voice, you can now rise above them and you're not competing, they're not competing at your level. So as brands separate scale from impact, you can say like, I'm going to reach 1,000 people with this event, but it will, and there won't be much social follow-up, but there's going to be 50 people at this event, but it is going to be great, and they are going to love your brand, and they're going to become brand advocates of both of us when they're done, and then we're going to go and do that a few more times. They're on board for it, and it comes from risk-taking, it comes from understanding, it comes from not feeling like they're being gypped by sponsored content and like, you know, just guaranteed page views that are coming out of whatever end of the internet. And so I think there is a real shift there, and publishers need to continue delivering that value and that real differentiator. So keep like inventing different ways to bring them in and speak with authority and credibility and like do that work for them.
I think something that's exciting for us too is the need for diversification of revenue for us as a brand and a business is exciting in allowing brands to kind of come along with us for that ride. So whether it's event activation or merchandising or commerce or, you know, extension into live or broadcast. Like I said it earlier, you know, the fans or people that we're talking to or communicating with every day have so many options out there. Like live is something that is, live sports is something that, you know, it brings you in and keeps you around. So I think like the investment for us in live streaming platforms, leveraging all the IP and rights that we have through the leagues and extending that through to Bleacher Report to like have different touch points for like different types of fans, I think is really important. Figuring out the right way to bring brands into the fold there is, you know, that's what keeps us up at night. That's what keeps it exciting. So I think just, you know, trying to continue to like lead the pack in the sports space is what we challenge ourselves with, and disrupting things along the way, failure, thinking about things in different ways. I think that's just, you know, that's the nature of the beast. But yeah, that's where we see things going, I think.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's have time. We have time for more questions. Yep.
Hi, Matt Polino from TripAdvisor. You guys all spoke to client direct relationships, but I'm curious if you can kind of pinpoint the percentage of proactivity versus reactive to an RFP.
Those all weren't direct. Those all weren't client direct. Some of those came through from RFPs.
Yeah, it's been an evolution of proactive versus reactive, and what we have found is the volume of proactive that we were once doing wasn't as successful as we thought it was. So we've balanced the amount of proactive work that we're giving for free to brands that doesn't convert. We've reduced that quite a bit, and we have qualifiers to help us understand where it makes the most sense. But as far as your other question of direct versus agency, I would say all our large-scale programs come from client direct. So we know that for a fact, that our biggest and best partnerships will be born at the client side. So we're very proactive in working with clients. But in looking at the ratio of revenue, I would say it's probably 60% through agencies and then 40% direct.
Yeah, our percentage of client versus agency is fairly similar to that. I think we have the luxury on our side at Bleacher Report with being tied into the larger kind of mothership of like, we have the relationships with the NBA and all the official marketing partners, with the NCAA, with Major League Baseball, with with UEFA. So we have connections into those CMOs or decision makers at all the kind of biggest blue chip brands for us in sports. So the challenge there is going to them with different and unique ways of kind of like upping a program or renewing or things like that. But those are the biggest, I wouldn't say the best, but like the biggest scale kind of partnerships come straight through the client. And then, you know, for us, like when we were able to tell the agency, like, listen, we've had this conversation and this is how we see things kind of shaping up. Like, we want you guys to be a part of this and feel inclusive. Like, it may feel like an afterthought to them, and we have to be very careful there. But I think it's so important for our business to have like that straight line into the decision maker at the client who knows the business best, which has worked out well for us.
I wanted to draft off of Scott's point about internal organization and hiring and how you're staffing this up, because as I've talked to publishers over a number of years, this has really gone through an evolution for a lot of publishers about how they actually want to structure the branded content internally. And one of the challenges, as you said, is staffing. And whether you want an elastic staff, whether you want a permanent staff, how is it structured for all three of you? And what have you learned? How has it evolved?
For us, it is largely internal staff, and certainly the creative ideas and the larger pieces of execution, edit, and producers are in-house. When we go into things like video, there might be like day crews that come in. If we're getting to some like really deep like infographic work, we might have people on our freelance staffs that come in and help with those. But you can't be fully you can't have everyone on your team at all times. It's just impossible.
But is it a content studio sort of model where you've got dedicated staff to this particular product?
We're getting back to that. They are, but they also have like their regular day jobs, which is like being the lead editorial for certain sites. They're playing double duty, but there is like the content studio team, but it's just more on the creative side than deeper into the production. But I think as we go and through 2020, like we'll be staffing up more of that just because we're having more success with sales. So it's a volume thing, and you just keep rolling. It's like as it gets bigger, like you get bigger.
I think we do operate like a content studio. So we have a roster of writers, in-house animators. Any of our animated series are all done in-house. We have 15 producers that are on shoots throughout the country or the world at any given day. Where we do outsource a bit is if we need certain film crews or fixers on the ground at certain shoots and things. But we've definitely built our business up to be that fully functioning kind of content studio, which it's taken a lot. But I think that kind of puts us in a position to where brands can come to us as a one-stop shop, and I mentioned that kind of like playmaker capability. Like that's where we're fully able to kind of embed our folks within a brand or give them a roster of different ideas to activate on that kind of will resonate with our fans. So yeah, the goal for us has been to kind of have that full serve studio capability.
Yeah, we share a similar setup. We have a team that's dedicated to branded content that then sits under their individual expertise, so centers of excellence. so that they're all, from the content side, working off of the same ideas in production and content and strategy and audience development. And we keep it a pretty tight crew, and we actually leverage a lot of production company just because the volume is so high. But I mean, we're constantly analyzing how much of that we need to bring in-house versus how much we need to have as a production company, and we're looking at that constantly.
One thing that's interesting about that too is like we've kind of found like there is this constant volume that we need to be careful of, just kind of like set it and forget it, send a crew somewhere, shoot a piece of branded content, get it live, and then move on to the next one. Like, we need to be cognizant about that, because we need brands to feel that love. We need to kind of slow down and like not just check a box, which I think we've had some kind of interesting learnings and things that haven't gone our way. But I think now we're kind of being like, okay, staff accordingly, figure it out where we need to hire out, let's do that, but not be this constant churn of just branded stuff. It needs to kind of come back to being like our core and fit within our core business.
And when you said they were vertical, was that like by like, here's your social branded content team, here's your video content team, here's your O&O web?
Yeah, that's right. So we used to sit independently, where the branded content team would sit between sales and content. Mm-hmm. And so what we've done is now remove that barrier per se, and then put each expert under the verticals we already had existing on the content side. So whether that's production, whether that's social, distribution, and so they still service the branded content business, but they really ladder up to those divisions.
Guys, this was a great conversation. Thank you so much. Melynda, thanks.
Thank you, MediaPost.
Thanks, everyone.
We're going to, and we'll have a roundtable at the end of the morning to continue this. We are going to break. We're going to take about a 15-minute break for coffee.